Hi, we're starting the Facebook Live. Spiff, you want to introduce things?
Sure. Welcome back to 2-on-1. This week we are talking to Minister Qadry Harris on Black Panther, which is a really exciting conversation that we've all been looking forward to. So this is Qadry. Qadry, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Qadry Paul Harris. What should I say about myself? My full-time job, I am an AP World History teacher at Amistad High School in New Haven, Connecticut. My part-time job is I serve as the youth minister at First Baptist Church of Stratford, Connecticut, under Dr. William B. Sutton III, and I'm also a member at Park Avenue Christian Church here in New York City, where Reverend Kaji Dosa is the senior pastor and Reverend Stephanie Kendall is the executive minister. I'm glad to be here. Not under the best circumstances considering everything that's happening in our country and in our world. But I think this conversation presents a unique opportunity to have a little bit of, I don't know if entertainment is the right word, but have a little bit of a escape, while at the same time allowing us to be critical of the societal forces at work that are responsible for the current state of affairs in the world. So really glad to be here. Really glad to be here.
Really glad to have you. And I will name that, we did just talk a little bit about, like, is this the best time to have this conversation and what's happening right now? And Qadry has been, this specific topic and this guest is not by coincidence. Spirit led us here because Qadry's been on our calendar for a couple of weeks now. And so, but well before we could have seen what the state of our world today looks like. And so with his permission and blessing and with, prayerful discernment, we decided that this was the right time to continue to have these conversations. Absolutely. So lifting up and centering Black narratives, Black voices, Black art. And yeah, so I just wanted people out there that are watching to know that this was not just a, like, let's call Qadry and talk Black Panther. Like, it was.
Yeah, we're not pandering. We may pander with other stuff, but in this moment, we're not pandering.
Right. So I do notice that we are live on Facebook. Qadry, if you wanted to share it on your Facebook.
Yeah, I think, let me see.
I know that he was starting a watch party, friends, so.
If only Instagram would let us have.
There we go. Boom, boom. Good, we're live.
There we go. Qadry Harris has started a watch party video, so I've at least been invited, so I know that you're on.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So, okay, Black Panther. Actually, I would like to start something. I want to throw something out there if I could.
Let's do it.
I lived in Cedar Hill, Texas when I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth. And Cedar Hill is south of I-20. It is South Dallas, and Cedar Hill is primarily Black. So I went to see Black Panther in theaters because I'm a Marvel movie nerd. And I realized sitting in the theater, I had this moment, and again, I've said before, I'm working towards being more and more anti-racist and being more and more aware of whiteness and privilege and participation in that. And I'm watching the movie and I'm like, I'm seeing this movie entirely differently from everyone else in this room. I'm just consuming a product. It was the first time I really understood representation matters. And I hate to say that because I was like 30 years old or however long ago Black Panther came out. But it was so different to watch the movie with people for whom it was. I don't know how I can phrase a question on that. I hope I haven't just said something ridiculous to launch things off. I got it a little bit more. What was it like seeing the movie? And that's for Spiff and for Qadry. And Jesus, did I just stick my foot in my mouth? I hope not.
No. Yeah. I could start. What was it like seeing the movie? I think the immediate reaction was, it's about time.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have been other Black superhero movies before. I know a lot of people point to the Blade trilogy with Wesley Snipes. I saw a few memes about Shaquille O'Neal and
In Steel?
In Steel, Will Smith and Hancock.
Mm-hmm.
bad guys. Sorry, I worked on Hancock, so.
Right. So that's what, like,
I have a weird.
there were examples of
Yeah.
other Black superheroes, but I think generally what I saw amongst my Black peers were, we knew that there was something different about this film. Whether it was the star power behind it, the budget behind it, the marketing behind it, it's being a part of, probably the most successful superhero franchise run we've seen in recent years.
Yeah.
We knew that this was a big deal. In addition to the representation, I think it was a sense of unapologetic Black pride that came from the promotion of the movie and the hype surrounding it going into it. And I think that was really powerful and really significant. So the day actually going to see it, one, I was really happy that the storyline, the action, the character chemistry, the great writing, all lived up to the hype. But it definitely was a sort of, it was a celebration.
So for me, there was so I'm a big Marvel person. Well, not as big as some of our friends, but if any of you follow me on Twitter, and I've stopped for the time being because I think that it's important, but like in isolation, I decided that I was going to say goodnight to Chris Evans every night at the end of my night.
He ever acknowledged?
And because I'm a woman who lives alone in the epicenter of this pandemic, and I have no one to say goodnight to by my side at this point. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna say goodnight to my beloved. Like, dream big, right? And so I'm a big. I love Cap, and Cap has problems. I can name it for lots of reasons. But I love the franchise, and I love everything. And Black Panther came out like, it was Civil War when we first see him.
Yes.
Yeah.
His first appearance was Civil War.
And so like he came at just like this monstrous time for Marvel, right? And it was one of those things. So I live here in New York City. I saw it on the Upper West Side, which is, New York is diverse, but if we're going to talk about diversity, the Upper West Side is not necessarily where we find the most diversity. And it was packed. I was one of two white people that I saw. And I felt like an intruder for a little bit. And I also waited. I'm going to say that I see all Marvel movies on opening night. I did not see this on opening night because I wanted to make sure that that I wasn't taking a ticket from someone that has not been able to see a movie of and about themselves. And so I went and I sobbed in a way that it's like when I realized for the first time, and this is where I'm going to take it a little bit theologically, when I first, like in my heart, realized that the Bible was written by and for Black communities. And like the purity and the wholeness and the goodness and the that came out of this one movie that seems so above the rest. And I love them all. I do. I think there's value in, like it's entertainment, like, oh my goodness. But this carries a truth to it that the others don't. Like, it suspends the disbelief of magic, like, because there's something about superheroes that are magical, right? It's why we look to them.
Yep.
And it's this grounded that magic, and maybe it was because for me it was like, oh, this is a culture and an understanding that I just know not of. And so like this magic wasn't magic, but it was part of a reality that I could literally live and believe in, and which does a lot for me, theologically, when I look and use the Bible and see so many of the miracles that happen, right? Like, it's not a time in which I am familiar personally. And so I believe, I have faith in it. And so like, there was a faith for me in this movie that I had not experienced in other movies. And it was reassured as I watched this movie in preparation for this conversation twice this week, because I watched it once and just like gave myself like a couple hours to just like sit in it and then rewatch it and like kind of take more notes. But like, it is a masterpiece. It is so good for lots of levels. And so I'm really grateful for the storytelling. I'm really grateful for the act and just everything. And I hope that the truth that came from it inspires studio heads and production companies and all of my friends out there that I know who I love, and I'm now seeing some for the first time and some not for the first time, you know, spread across their social media feeds, Black Lives Matter and all of that. Like, let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's invest and lift up and center Black voices and experiences in all forms of media, including big budget productions.
Yeah, so Steph, I think it was really telling, and I loved how you connected Black Panther's first appearance in the MCU to the Civil War film, because prior to the Black Panther film, I thought Civil War was the best movie that the MCU produced. And part of it was because I thought all throughout the plot of the film, they were making not so subtle critiques of this seesaw that we seem to be on in American society when we're choosing between freedom and security, right? And I think we're seeing that play out now, specifically with how these uprisings and protests are being policed after the various murders of Black bodies across the country, right? And Black Panther, the film, continues in that because there are so many different societal critiques that they're making that I'm sure we're going to get into and talk about it from a theological sense.
Yeah. So the second time I watched Black Panther this week, I took an entire thing of notes just as they came to me, like questions, thoughts, theories. And so, but one that kept coming up, so I want to pose it, and we might as well just get into it, right?
Do it. That's why we're here.
It is.
By the way, before you get into it, Spiff, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Qadry, we will inevitably ask you what book or character from the Bible does the most metaphorically lines up to the Black Panther. I think that giving you that question in advance may, I don't know, you may have that answer already. You may need to percolate. I just don't want to surprise our guests.
It is. That's true. We should start. Anyone that you're on, just know that, like, we're going to ask you either a book of the Bible or a story or a person who aligns most for that kind of your top characters. So,
oh, that's going to be good. Okay.
But that's how we usually end our conversation, is we bring it back in that.
Perfect. So, all right. I'll put it on the back burner.
That didn't get in our group text, and we will forget at this point. So.
I struggle with calling him Killmonger or Njadaka. What makes him not the hero?
What makes him not the hero? All right, so this is an excellent question, and here's why. When the film first came out, I remember there was a lot of dialogue in Black circles about whether Killmonger was actually a villain. My opinion was he absolutely was. Killmonger is the epitome of, from my perspective, what we call in Black circles a hotep, right? And what we experience from, and again, there are going to be some Black people that think hotep is a derogatory term and I'm trolling other Black people, but here's what I'm saying. Those kind of perspectives are attractive to young, impressionable, traumatized Black folk that are fed up with living in a white racist society, right? And the hotep rhetoric and agenda is attractive because it's preaching a pro-Black message and it's making excellent critiques of white power structures, right? So you take Killmonger, legitimate question, like that first scene between him and the art curator, right?
Yeah.
When they're talking about the vibranium, he said, oh, nah, it's from Wakanda and it's vibranium.
And it says, did your ancestors pay a fair price? Like,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's an excellent critique of, frankly, it's like we having conversations about looting versus protest right now, right? Someone posted a meme today on Facebook, and I think I shared it. It's like, y'all forgetting, y'all looted an entire continent.
Yeah,
Two continents, actually.
If we loot a Target and put it in a museum, is that okay?
Right. and that's what I'll say. It's like, even in so the Hotep agenda is very attractive because they make very accurate, direct, critical points about how pervasive white racism is and present in our society, and how it impacts negatively almost every aspect of life for people of color, specifically Black people, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the problem with the Hoteps. It is inherently sexist. And this is why Killmonger is not the hero. Like, you look at the way that he treats and interacts with the other Black women in the movie. It is the epitome of toxic, right? That whole scene where he's lifting up the gardener, not lifting up, he's strangling her with his newly acquired superhuman strength, right? And it's like, this is the epitome of Black men traumatized and beaten up by broader white society. The moment we get any type of status, we turn around and abuse Black women, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He sacrificed his girlfriend unnecessarily to execute Claw, right? Because that was his goal the whole time. It was, I'm going to show you that I can do what T'Challa can't. So this woman that was romantically involved with him is expendable because she's in the way of his ultimate goal, right? Major problem with the Hotep agenda. The inherent sexism in it and how that's divisive and destructive within Black communities, right? Other thing, not so much that this comes out in Killmonger's character. I guess we could get into some details with it, but it's, the Hotep agenda is not content with Black freedom.
Okay.
The Hotep agenda is not content with Black pride, Black power, Black self-esteem. Many times the Hotep agenda, and definitely in Killmonger's case, was hell-bent on Black revenge. And like not driving colonizers out of our spaces, which I think is necessary and warranted many times. No, it's, we are going to do everything to them that they did to us. And there's a certain level of me that understands the righteous indignation and the rage. Absolutely. Logically speaking, I think it's stupid because we know where that approach gets us. Like, we're living it as Black people every day, right? I think it doesn't make sense trying to replicate said agenda.
Yeah.
Other reasons why Killmonger is not a hero. Well, one, he lost, right? I mean, that's the obvious one. Like,
well, does he lose? I mean, part of that part. So I have like all these questions about this, right? Because like at the end, T'Challa does offer him, says, we can possibly still save you, right? And he's like, what for? Like, you know, just spread me in the ocean. He inevitably kind of chooses his own destiny at the end, which I think there's a redemption there. We talk a lot about, you know, kind of the anti-heroes, you know, the villains, are they redeemable as people of faith, as faith leaders? Like, what does redemption kind of look like and carry? At least we've done that in past conversations. And so with this, I was really, I don't know, I kept going back. He's a dynamic character, obviously.
Absolutely.
He's one that points out a lot of, you know, he comes in and demands this kind of shakeup from Wakandans. Is like, why are we not using the good that we have, right? To help the diaspora, right? Like,
and in that, I think he was spot on.
Sure.
He was spot on. And I think even why I think it is a question worth asking whether or not he's a hero, anti-hero, or a villain is because when you think about the hero of the story, T'Challa, right? in fact, he came around to Killmonger's perspective to a certain extent with regard to that, right? Like that was his level of growth that he learned from Killmonger. And he says it to his ancestors, like, we were wrong to prioritize our sacred tradition of privacy over and against the freedom and liberation of our kinfolk, right? So I think theologically, that opens the door for so many different dialogues, right? Like how we're holding on to traditions and traditionalisms because it's comfortable for us. It's what we've always done at the expense of alienating other Black people, right? And that opens, yeah. So.
Arthur, thoughts?
Can I ask a question in regards to, I had not ever drawn the connection of Killmonger and his blatant anti-sexism, or rather sexism, not anti-sexism, misogyny towards the gardener and towards the girlfriend. In comic books, in the general culture of comic books, which bleeds into the MCU, there's a syndrome called women in refrigerators syndrome. In 1994, there was a new Green Lantern named Kyle Rayner. They wanted to make new generations of heroes. I'm sorry, forgive the digression, there is a question. Kyle Rayner, in order to show the severity of the threat he faced, his girlfriend, Alexa DeWitt, was either crushed into or cut up and put into a refrigerator by the bad guy, I think it was Major Force, Major something or other, in order for Kyle to then need to avenge her. Comic book writer Gail Simone started to point out all of the various times in which women were used, they were depowered, they were harmed, they were assaulted, they were sexually assaulted, they were murdered, whatever the case may be, in order to provide motivation or background or depth to a male character. And I'm completely unfamiliar with the term Hotep, and pardon if I should not use it. But I wonder, I had a question and then I was listening to you and I lost it, but I still thought I should speak. And I beg your pardon, that's like the most obnoxious white guy thing to do. I'm just gonna step back. So it is power without progress, or is it no, never mind. It'll come to me. I'm so sorry. This is one where one of the two is an idiot. So
yeah, the last thing I'll say about Killmonger and his sexism is I think there was a clear vitriol and violent tendency towards women throughout the entire film. And I don't know if that was done purposely, but for me at least, that was definitely a distinguishing characteristic that made him like, oh yeah, no, he's definitely the villain in the story.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I thought, for me, his misogyny and his sexism was really prevalent, and I think it was set up because he's a character that inevitably is going to make you ask, is he wrong? Is he the villain? Right? I think like he's set up to be that way, but because you already know that for all intents and purposes, you're set up to believe that Wakanda is a nation led by women. It is. I mean, like the Black Panther is not a woman, but like you have Okoye, you have Shuri, you have Nakia, you have the Queen Mother, you have all of these. Like for all the people that are actually there, the women are the ones that are the protectors. They're the ones that are in charge of their most valuable. I mean, Shuri is in charge of their most valuable resource, right?
Right.
There's a real question of who is actually running Wakanda.
Right. No, but I don't think there is. And frankly, so let's get theologically with it, right? That's the structure of the Black church, right? Yep. T'Challa is very gifted, right? Super talented. He works hard. He's athletic. He's smart. He has all of these talents, right? And he plays a role. And a part of that is him being put up out front because it would probably be antithetical to the tradition for Shuri or Okoye to take on that role, right?
Right.
So T'Challa does it, And I think when T'Challa does his job faithfully, he understands that he has one role amongst many, and the many roles are the Black women that are supporting him in his role, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think it looks like faithfully for a Black male pastor to serve in a Black church that serves mostly Black women and girls, and not be a patriarch, right? Not buy into the patriarchy and the sexism.
Yeah.
Right? It very rarely goes that way.
Sure. But that was, going back to Killmonger, that I think that his sexism was set up so you knew that he culturally, you were, obviously he is one. He's got the lip, the shining, like whatever that, like the kind of blood of Wakanda, right? That run, like he is welcome and he is a part of them, and yet he is not. And I think that sexism really set you up to, as you were wrestling with, is he someone that I want to root for in some way? You realize very early on, no, because it's antithetical to the structure of Wakanda, which is the structure of the Black church, which is the structure. Right. So, and
then, Tahir, thanks for pointing that out. Like, Bass is a goddess, right? So even that isolates him from the Wakandan best values, right? Like, we have a female deity, and you're treating Black women this way.
Yeah.
I think that was a clear indication that he was the villain the entire time.
Right. I should also note, just because it's trivia, in the comic books, Shuri has become the Black Panther at one point for about, I think, 8 months.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
that makes me want to actually. I saw that the Shuri comic book was coming out, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm not a comic book person. Has never been one to sit down and read them." Like it made me be like, "Ooh, maybe I'll get into this."
So Marvel getting ready for the Black Panther's debut in the MCU did something rather revolutionary, where they decided to let Black writers write the Black Panther. Mr. Coates did a run for, I think, 3 years. They began to address what it would mean to have Afrocentric writing, and done with a voice from it. It just felt, oh, that's right. So, and this is perhaps not cogent to our conversation, and perhaps it is. The Black Panther married Storm of the X-Men, who is a Moroccan, who then ended up in Kenya as a weather goddess, according to the 1970s Giant Size X-Men #1. They retconned the entire thing that the two most prominent Black characters, who happened to be from Africa, a continent 3.6 times the size of China, not only knew each other, but were betrothed to one another as children and then reconnected. Their marriage has since been annulled because of the Phoenix Force, of all things, that does not matter in there. What does it mean in representation? I guess I want to ask, where did Marvel still fall short with the Black Panther? Where did they go? Where did the stereotype take over from the authentic storytelling? Were there parts where it was like, that's a little contrived, or that's a little colonizing?
So I've heard similar arguments from people about, particularly my friends that are first and second generation from the continent, talking about how they could have done a better job of portraying the diversity of African languages, African religions, African people, different pigmentations of African people. Like you just pointed out, Africa, you said, it's 3 times the size of China, right? Hundreds of different dialects, hundreds of different tribes. So and again, I'm not going to speak too much on that because it's not my story to tell. And frankly, it's not my area of expertise, but I have listened to a lot of my African colleagues, and they've made convincing cases about how the movie felt short in that regard. What I would say is there is something that's a little bit cliche about, how do I want to put this? T'Challa is his character, his demeanor, and even his approach to the geopolitical problems of the world. T'Challa is the type of character that liberal white folk are comfortable with listening to.
Mm-hmm. He has the right kind of accent. He has the right kind of demeanor.
Even with the superpowers, he presents himself not so much in the Civil War film, but towards the end of the Civil War film and definitely throughout the Black Panther, he presents himself in a non-threatening way. Even when he's leveraging his power, right? Like, look at his interactions with Ross when they're interrogating Claw, right? He's very subtle, where like he's having these backdoor conversations in the language with Okoye, like, oh no, he's really leaving with us. But let me just finesse these white folk enough, right? Let me not ruffle them up to. T'Challa is what we would call, and again, like, I'm not being crude here. I'm not making an insult, because there absolutely needs to be a place for this within the Black freedom struggle, right? But T'Challa is the intelligent individual that adheres to Black respectability politics and does it in an effective way, right? He speaks the way, he moves the way, he goes about handling his business in a way that's progressive. But one of the most effective parts about it is that, for the most part, white people are comfortable dealing with it that way. Yeah. And they pose the person of Killmonger as the threatening Black anti-hero he's saying things out in the open, like not in the backdoor meetings. He's saying things like to the white people, like, you think your ancestors got everything they have by paying a fair price? Yeah. Typically speaking, that's deviating from the respectability politic, right? Like, Black folk know, and we talk about it all the time in professional and personal settings about, oh, you can't say stuff like that in front of white folk. So the guy that does that is written as the villain. So I think there was something to be said about that. And it offers us a way to critically reflect theologically, right? Like, white churches, all Black people, and definitely all Black Christians don't think and believe the same things. Which Black voices are you willing to listen to? Are you willing to focus, and are you willing to center? Are you only focusing the respectability Black voices? The ones that, even when they're calling you out on your racism, they're doing it in a way that you can tolerate.
I don't want to hurt your feelings, but maybe you could think about, I'm sorry, that was an attempt to make fun of white people.
Yeah, I mean,
talking it works.
It's the idea that, like, everyone, it's Malcolm versus King, right? It's a little, how many Martin Luther King quotes are out there, and how many Malcolm quotes are,
Okay, I have to digress for 1 second. Did y'all see, of the white people, white-splaining back to Martin Luther King III, as he said, you need to read this, what my dad actually said about riots, and they're like, no, that's not how MLK would have been. Like, they collect up.
But see, it's like, that doesn't surprise me, because honest assessment, and again, white people don't say this, I will. Martin Luther King Jr. III, for decades now, has been the epitome of what we just said as Black respectability politics.
Yeah.
But the second he starts saying something that the white folk are uncomfortable with, they're going to turn on him just as quickly, because he's making them uncomfortable now, right? And I think that's, again, personally, I think we all do it to a certain extent, but generally speaking, I'm not interested in adhering to the respectability politics of any white institution. I'm not. And I'm not going to apologize for that, right?
So.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of
that. I'm sorry. Just let me finish this one. People Black folk that do adhere to the respectability politic, especially in the church, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying do it faithfully and realistically. And realistically, you have to know that respectability politic ain't a guarantee that you're going to get from these white folk what you want. And at any second, when you act or speak in a way that they deem to be uncomfortable, there's going to be some consequences that go along with that. And we need to be realistic in understanding that. And what that concretely looks like is stop ridiculing those of us that are not interested in living into the respectability politic.
Yeah. I'm the part of my call to, my white colleagues, it's the same. I do a lot of queer work, right? And LGBT, and it's Pride Month and all of that. And there's
actually, no, we voted Spiff. It's Wrath Month. We're not doing Pride. We're just going straight to Wrath. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
we had a Zoom call. Everybody was on it. Yeah.
And I'm here to listen because I identify as neither queer nor Black. And so
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
No. But these are the things, right? These are the things in which we got to listen to. You got to be held accountable. Accountability is love and respect. And we're going to fail, and we're going to apologize, and we're going to fail again, and we're going to apologize. And you just got to keep moving, because our feelings are not as important as the lives and dignity of those that have been structurally marginalized and oppressed. So, there's that saying that it's like, specifically, I've heard this a lot with people that identify as trans. Once you've talked to one trans person, you've talked to one trans person, right? It's in that same way as like, once you've talked to one Black person, one Black Christian, you've talked to one Black Christian. Like, part of when we say we want to listen, we need to make white people, I'm speaking to us, when we say we're willing and ready to listen, right? Like, that's the big thing. We're listening. Yesterday's blackout was all about listening. But I have thoughts on that too. But it was, who are you listening to? What is the diversity of voices and opinions? And that, are you only listening to things that affirm in the ways in which you have been a positive ally? Or are you really willing to listen to the ways in which undergird your sense of comfort? And that's really what we are called as faith leaders to do in the church. It's what we are called to do as people that are allies. And this leads me to my next question. Look at this.
Segue queen.
I want to go to Agent Ross, who
I was going to go there too.
When Agent Ross, when they go to M'Baku, when Queen Mother and Shuri and the tribe, his name is
the Jabari tribe.
Jabari, thank you. The Jabari tribe with M'Baku. And he's, and T'Challa comes back to life and says, take care of my mother, and, blah, blah, blah. And then Agent Ross, without prompt, says, I'll be there, or something like that with you, right? Like, they're all like, we've got you. And it's like this coalition of those that are welcome and actually Wakandans. And just because he has been invited by lots of circumstance into that space, right? He automatically assumes and says, I'll be there. And then they all give him that look, and he goes, what? You're going to need me. And then they all just kind of keep going. And so I want to talk about, or I want to pose to both of us, what is the role of allyship? I think, Pastor Qadry talked about this at the Friday vigil that was led, and those the white gathering that kept chanting Black Lives Matter over Eric Garner's mother, right? There is intention and there's action. And what does it really mean to listen? And what does it mean to be invited into the space of allyship? And, versus the white privilege that assumes that their help is necessary.
Yeah. So a few things. I think Ross's character development was very interesting, to say the least. Mm-hmm. Because in many ways, I think he was symbolic of white liberalism, right? Good intentions, definitely mixed in with naive realities, a sense of do-gooderism, a sense of paternalism. There's a certain sense, and he makes progress with this, even though he wasn't perfect, even by the end of the movie, but him thinking that he knows what's best for Black freedom than Black people do. And that's a major, major problem with white liberals in the church, white liberals in politics, white liberals on the workspace, white liberals in school. Like this idea, and even if it's not explicitly said, through their movements, through actions, through microaggressions with people of color. The assumption that's operating is you and your white privilege know what's best for people of color and Black people specifically for us to get free. And Ross definitely participates in that, particularly within his role in the last battle for Wakanda between, the Panther and Killmonger. Here's the best part of his character. First of all, we don't need any more allies. We don't. If you want to be an accomplice, sure. You want to be an accomplice to the fight against white racism, sure. First thing he did, shut up and listen, right? Took strict instructions from Shuri, right? Like, one, listen to the Black women, and two, listen to people that are smarter than you. We could start there, right?
Yeah.
Listen to Black people that are smarter than you and allow them to tell you and instruct you on how you can do something that we approve to play a role in this grand fight. And yeah, that's going to require sacrifices. In Ross's case, he sacrificed his safety, right? And his freedom by being in the virtual plane. He could have been executed, taken as a prisoner of war. I'm not telling anyone to go out there and be a martyr, even though it may come to that. We don't know.
Sure.
That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying white folk that are actually serious about being accomplices and about fighting white racism on a daily basis, which includes after all of the, outrage from these recent shootings past, if you are really serious about sustaining this fight for the long haul, you are going to have to sacrifice something on a daily basis. It may be relationships with your racist family members or your racist friends, your racist spouse. It may be making intentional efforts to make sure that you don't occupy so many all-white spaces or predominantly white spaces, right? Going out of your way to find places where people of color gather, where they're willing to accept you on their own terms. This is doing the work. Yes, read the books, make the posts, get your hashtags, sign your petitions, donate money, all of that. All of that. In addition to it,
oh no, did he freeze?
I think he's froze.
You come back.
what actions you're taking, they all matter.
I'm sorry, Qadry, could you repeat your last point? Only
You
because
froze for a
we
minute.
froze on the connection.
What did I freeze?
You froze about 30 seconds ago. So you said read the books,
Yeah.
give your money, do all of the things, but also, and what I'm assuming is you're gonna have to give up something to.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
There's gonna be some type of sacrifice.
So I like that your favorite line is my favorite line from the film of "Don't sneak up on me, colonizer." And he goes, "No, my name is."
Actually, I think my favorite line is your favorite line.
I beg your pardon.
No, that's what y'all.
Well, no, but I just love. Oh no, my name is Agent Ross. I know your name.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful. It was just. It was uncomfortable and funny, and I loved it.
Right. There was a lot going on in that particular phrase, and the way it was delivered was such vigor and enthusiasm. It was so authentic. Yeah, I loved it. I actually got a T-shirt with the rendition of the quote on it, because I loved it so much. Right. But I think particularly though, right, we're getting to a point now. Why it's my favorite line, where I think there's a certain power to calling things for what they are, authentically, truthfully, and directly, and not only behind closed doors, the way I know for a fact Black people have been doing at least all 20 years of my life, and the way I'm hearing it in my history for longer than that. We need to start doing these things out in the open, specifically because not doing it hasn't worked, and hasn't gotten us really far. So I'm trying to be solution oriented and brainstorm for progress. So let's try a different strategy.
Not doing it hasn't worked. Like, I want to write that on my wall. That's just perfect.
Yeah. Arthur, go. Sorry.
Oh no, I was simply going to add in for white folks doing allyship. It is not the job of Black people or people of color to tell you how racism affects them or to answer any questions on that. White people need to be resources for white people on fragility, on rage, on systems. Like there's nuance that sometimes really eager allies don't understand when they should be accomplices. Um, I, I've had to assist a couple of people realign their priorities.
Yes, yeah. So the priorities thing is really interesting because the way I've been dealing with this is very central to my biblical hermeneutics and how I read and interpret scripture and how it emerges from an ancient context and how I'm using it as a theological source to make meaning and relevance out of modern day issues, right? And coming from, in many ways, I guess my respectability politic is I'm still very much deeply tied to and rooted in Black church and Black church traditions, particularly with the cultural pride and affirmation and the Blackness of God. At the same time, I am very much firmly, deeply rooted in the liberal theology of mainline white Protestant churches, which allows me or empowers me, I should say, to read scripture critically as opposed to literally, right? Now, for a lot of different reasons, the one that I typically go to is when these conversations about the split between liberal theology and evangelical theology and fundamentalist theology were happening, Black people in America were theologically concerned about getting lynched. So with few exceptions, we weren't taking part in these conversations about the split between liberal theology, fundamental theology, evangelical theology, right? So typically what happens in Black churches after the Civil War is we get dominated by white evangelical and fundamentalist theologies, right? Which takes a very different approach to the Bible than what I do. The way I read scripture is there's a hierarchy of values. And the first value is a Christ-centered hermeneutic on the greatest commandment, love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your spirit, and love your neighbor like you love yourself. There's no commandment greater than these, right? Where am I going with this? When there's looting happening in the country and people are more concerned with the looting and the property damage than they are with the loss of Black life that can't be recovered, when they're more concerned with the looting than the white racism that's responsible and undergirding for the riots and the looting. That's where I'm approaching. I'm like, yo, we got to get our priorities straight. Right? Same way, like biblically speaking, like we want to lift up and emphasize certain scriptures that alienate folks because of their gender, because of their sexuality, because they don't fit our social norms. And we're forgetting the first and the greatest commandment, to honor God and love each other as we love ourselves, right? So it's like we got our values messed up. We're prioritizing the wrong things here.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm writing something down because I'm preaching this Sunday, and I am preaching on the Genesis text of, we're all made in God's image, and we honor God as, we honor God above all else, and then we also honor each other because we are the image of God. And what does that look like? And so I was just making notes because some of what we're talking about here is just inevitably, it's what we're all talking about, right? And so it's inevitably going to show up on Sunday. So
I'm doing Hagar, naming God.
Yeah.
This also informs it.
I'm not preaching this Sunday, so God bless you.
So I'll see you online.
There you go.
So I have another question that came out of things, if I can move us in that direction.
Please.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so how do I want to phrase this? The overall question is self-preservation, and I mean self as in communal self and individual self, just? And this comes out of my understanding and my kind of, as we watch what happens with Wakanda, who is this kind of in a self-preservation state. The reasons why they don't share technology and do and don't, which is what, Angry Killmonger comes in and kind of shakes up and names. So I wrote just, I guess, go with my random notes. It says, non-intervention preventative self-stabilization as justice. Is self-preservation just? Was Wakanda in their self-stabilization years, where they just kind of were contained, a just community if they knew of suffering but stayed away? We know, so T'Chaka, right, is killed at like a UN conference, it's not like the ills and the sins of the greater world, the sins against black people in the greater world were unknown to Wakandans, and yet they stayed in in a state of self-growth. And there's no judgment value, it's just what happened. And we see T'Challa make that journey. Are they both just?
I think T'Challa said no, right? Like, I think that was the second ancestral plane scene, right? Where he's going through his resurrection, right? Yeah. He has that difficult conversation with his ancestors about, you were all wrong to prioritize your desired privacy and your desired ability to stay exclusive over liberating, like, your family from suffering and oppression. And you had the means to do it. You had the means to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And see, this is fascinating, because I think the way I've always dealt with this particular concern, like the tension between T'Challa as a native African and Killmonger being technically a second generation African, but also having being a descendant of the American Slavocracy, right? Like, that tension between Black Americans and Black Africans that are more closely connected to the continent, tension between Black Americans and Black Caribbeans, right? I think this is a loaded question.
I pose these things because they were just part of things that came out of my head. We don't have to answer them. We also don't have to have answers for them.
No, I know, because I'm trying to figure out how to say it's. I don't think Black people collectively are going to be free until all of us realize that one Black person's struggle has to be all of our Black people's struggle. And what that means is, and this happens a lot in America, Black Americans have to stop privileging and prioritizing our lived experiences and our lived struggles over and against other Black peoples. Now, that's complicated because, especially in America, we do have a unique experience, right? Like even other Black peoples that are coming to this country and dealing with the white racism are not necessarily descendants of the chattel slavery system in this country, and that does make a difference.
Mhm.
It does. It's a different experience, right? At the same time, Black Americans, I think we need to realize that our struggle is one part of the puzzle in a global scheme of anti-Black racism. I think we also need to realize, and this goes into all of the intersectional dynamics of identity and Blackness, right? Black men needing to realize that Black women's struggles are our struggles as well, right? Heterosexual Black people needing to realize, cisgendered Black people needing to realize that the struggles of our LGBTQ are Black struggles as well. And we can't privilege and prioritize any of them over each other. Now, there may be a need to emphasize, various components of that given the change in circumstance. But to answer your question directly, I cannot think of any circumstance where I have the means and the capabilities to liberate fellow Black people, and I'm just sitting back idly by because I'm comfortable. I don't think that can ever be justified if we are serious about Black freedom.
I'm hearing tones of womanism in there. That when Black women have a seat at the table, everyone else does because of intersectionality, which I'm always careful about using that term because I don't want to take it from womanist writings. I'm making a ridiculous bridge in this. Forgive me if I am, but I understand the liberation of every community is because of the liberation of any community within the diaspora. If that
yes, but specifically because I am influenced by and continue to be influenced by a plethora of womanist and Black feminist thinkers. No, I think we need to be even more specific with that. I think let's focus on Black freedom and Black liberation. I think for Black freedom and for Black liberation, there needs to be a concerted effort to centralize the experiences of Black women. And yes, that does include Black trans women, because the incarnation of their bodies, right, is the launching point for, I think, understanding and healing from so many different traumas. And I think for those of us that take issue with the statement I just said, if you're having a hard time empathizing with and relating to and seeing yourself in the experiences of other Black people, just because their being doesn't perfectly align with yours, I think that's a you problem. And I think you need to do the personal work of how to get past that. Now, I mean, I can help you through it, but I can't do that for you. And no one can, really.
Amen. Sorry, I realize I just keep asking questions. Like, I want to offer.
Cool. Oh yeah. Jump in. I'm sorry.
I want to offer just the space that other people ask questions. I just have this list of things that came to me, but I'm not moderating. It's a conversation. So
I mean, my questions honestly too would be ones like, what was the best action scene? Because I loved this movie as a movie, and I loved this movie as a message, and I loved there's 10 levels of this movie, and I loved each of them.
Sure.
So what was the best fight? What was the best moment? That was just worth the price of admission.
All right, the best action scene, I think that highway chase scene between T'Challa and Claw. Mm-hmm. Even the way the fight scene starts in the casino, that was just gangster. They walk in there, they're all strategically dressed in the colors of the Pan-African flag, right? Okoye's doing her thing with the staff. She pulls off the wig. So Nakia got her own fighting style. That's the way they juxtapose it. Nicoya is a soldier, and even her fighting style is that of a soldier, where Nakia's is a lot more subtle and relying on quickness and like she's a spy, right? So even that dynamic going on in that fight scene was great. T'Challa initially gets aired out with the with Claw's thing, and then comes back and he's that scene was gold, was absolute gold, and then the slow motion and I thought that was the best action scene. That in and of itself was, even if it wasn't a great critique of white culture and intracommunal relationships within Black communities, that scene in and of itself made it a great superhero movie.
So Andy Serkis being cast as Ulysses Klaue. Klaue in the comic books is completely irredeemable. And I know Spiff, the redemption conversations on this. He's a bad guy. He's like Marvel Comics is not subtle when it comes to racism. They had a villain called the Hate Monger, and I recommend you look him up because he wore bright purple Klan robes, and it turns out he was a clone of Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, like they're not subtle. Klaue is this nuts, just South African in the 80s, white South African in the 80s. Right. Yeah, but Andy Serkis, you can't look at him and think, well, that's a good guy. That's gone.
He was trash, yeah.
Yeah.
Scum. Yep.
And I love Andy Serkis as like a human being.
But he played that role excellently. Oh no, he was trash.
Yeah.
He was trash.
Totally.
There was nothing great. Yeah. Like there was no type of relatable character, like even Killmonger, Loki, even Thanos, you can relate to a little bit. Klaue was complete trash, like
just garbage, total garbage human.
Well, and I think that's part of where my very first question of Killmonger comes in is why is he a hero, anti-hero, villain? Because you have this like straight garbage villain. You have initially the like, here's the bad guy, and then like, as Killmonger kind of comes in steps, like, because the first thing you hear is him, talking about like taking back Wakandan artifacts, right? Like, and so it grows, and then you realize, oh, they're working together, and then no, he's really playing him and all of that, and so yeah, straight garbage, real villain.
So I have a question, if I may, and I do want to be cognizant of y'all's time, and I do beg your pardon as I'm just pointing out.
I got time.
Yeah, we're good.
So I live in Wichita, Kansas, which is a very Anglo part of the country. And we did a trunk or treat, and I'd been at this church for a few months, and a kid walked in wearing a Black Panther costume, and I was so excited because it was like, the muscle suit and the mask. He lifts it up, and he's this blonde white kid. And I viscerally started in that. And I shouldn't, I guess, have struggled about it. And I love that kid, incidentally. I know I minister to their family and such. I'm trying to think of the right way to ask the question. What does that ultimately mean in terms of it's not, is it okay for a white 6-year-old to dress as the Black Panther, but rather, what does it mean to create this kind of shift in these generations? What does it mean to, I did have to explain to a 25-year-old white man who will remain nameless, but I think he's watching, that he was not allowed to say Wakanda forever, in that it was appropriative or inappropriate nonetheless. How do we engage representation? And it's about time, and it's about telling a story that has levels and speaks in these metaphors, but also, is it okay? I think we all agree it's okay, but that idea of what does it mean for a 6-year-old white kid to say, I'm going to be T'Challa for Halloween? Yeah.
So I think one, and we should have probably named this earlier, right? Before we even agreed to doing this podcast, we had a whole conversation about how Qadry Harris doesn't speak for all Black people, right? So I'm about to give you my opinion on cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation, right? But again, this is my opinion. I'm not claiming to speak for all Black people, right? So let's use the example you took of the 6-year-old white kid wanting to dress up as the Black Panther. This is to be expected, right? This is what kids do. They see a cool superhero movie and they want to be the latest cool superhero for Halloween. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I think white parents that are raising their white children to be responsible with regard to leveraging white privilege effectively to combat white racism, that's an opportunity where, in age-appropriate ways, of course, you start having a conversation with your white kid about why this character is so special and significant to Black people and to Black culture. And there's no way, I think, you can start that conversation without, in age-appropriate ways, having conversations with your 6-year-old kid about white racism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of the more effective strategies that needs to be normalized in white family dynamics, in white neighborhoods, in white schools, right? Like building these conversations into the curriculum. Like the things that we teach kids a bunch of things. The kids are constantly learning, right? Maybe these type of conversations about you can, or because you got to be real careful with this one, right? It's cultural appropriation when you want to use and consume all of the cool things. Did my watch party end?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says no video playing. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Still recording though, so this will also, just for those of you that are still with us, this will be posted to as a full video on YouTube, and then because we've gone over the hour, it'll be in 2 chunks on Instagram Live, so you'll get to see the whole thing. And so not just that, and for those of you that are still watching on Facebook, thanks for staying with us.
Oh, you know what?
Are you done on Facebook? Is that why?
Yeah, mine just dropped off Facebook. That's exactly why. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's what happened.
I have no idea why that happened. I'm gonna please.
Facebook's having issues, but again, we can continue the conversation.
Okay.
Arthur, you try and get back up. Qadry, you want to finish?
You're free to lose momentum on your point. You're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I also.
So it was
you're talking about curriculum. You're talking about like stages of curriculum and.
Yep. So it worked into curriculum for children, talking about the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's cultural appropriation when you want to use, consume, and take all of the cool items from Black culture, but don't love Black people. Like what does that look like? It's the examples I can use, like white people joining Black fraternities and sororities, white people doing things like dressing up as the Black Panther, white people doing things like wearing cornrows, like the white people engaging in hip hop culture. These are all examples that we can point of, right? Not anything necessarily wrong with those things. It becomes a problem when Black people tell you, hey, you did this, you said this, and it hurt me, and here's why. Mm-hmm. And us flipping it as if the Black person is the one with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, this is when we start talking about cultural appreciation and start talking about cultural appropriation, right? It's, you want to take from us, but you don't want to listen to us. You want to take from us, you don't want to sacrifice anything to be that type of accomplice, like what we were talking about with Agent Ross, right?
So
you want to take things from us, but you only want to center certain Black voices that affirm you in your whiteness.
And it's interesting you use the word consume, that appropriation is about consuming rather than participating or inhabiting. because when Agent Ross is with M'Baku, he threatens to eat him.
Yeah.
And I love that might be my favorite moment. He goes, "No, we're vegetarians." But it's
that was one of the funniest moments in the movie. Absolutely.
It was, but that's I don't know. You brought that back into my mind because there is that idea of I mean, we are culturally we are just consumers. We're not contributors. We're not co-inhabitants. We're not creators in a lot of spaces. It's just we have to devour. I will say that on with white people engaging non-mainstream white media.
Sure. What I would say is when white people are engaging in Black culture, try to think of it not as, well, one, you shouldn't be consuming because you shouldn't be like seeking to destroy. It's, you know, you're culturally appropriating when you are not empowering Black people to set the terms on which you engage Black culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, seriously. And it's like, white people really, and I think I just put something on Facebook about this a few hours ago. It's like, as long as white people are determined to set the terms and the rules for how Black people have to interact with them, that's still white racism. Mm-hmm. So if, like, and not that I would ever, not that I think this could happen, right? But just to use the example, if Black people collectively came together and said, no, we're not comfortable with that 6-year-old white kid wearing that Black Panther costume. Probably shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then white people turn it into a conversation. Well, who are you to tell us what our kids to wear? This, that, and now you're appropriating.
White people need to listen and then trust what they've heard.
Right. And again, that was a ridiculous example that I was.
Yeah. And that kid watched Black Panther like 20 times apparently, which made my heart.
And also, you know, I with all due respect and love for that white kid, I don't think it's appropriate for. I think these are conversations that it's okay to set the tone and saying, like, you know, this is not okay for us. I don't like. If I had a 6-year-old, I would not allow them, even if they love all of it. I would not allow assuming my child is white, my white kid at any age to dress as Black Panther. And here's why. We're not generations out enough in which Black kids have been able to have something that is theirs. And
that's valid. Yeah.
It's something that they can live into and breathe in life the ways that our kids have. For, you know, our little white kids is dressed up as Batman and Superman and every other man. We have very few females, but all the things. And so for me, like, part of it is, you know, white superiority complex, right? Or the operation of white superiority that, like, my little white kid gets to dress up as Black Panther. It's like, no, like, it's okay to say not everything is forced. We can appreciate it and love it and look at my kid who loves Qadry's kid, and Qadry's kid is, you know, like, we're not in a space in which even the youngest generation of today is not far enough removed and will not be far enough removed from spaces in which Black kids have had or even understand or, like, experience equality in representation.
Sure.
Enough for, like, I'm thinking in 100 years, here's hoping, right? 200 years, or maybe it's another 400 years in America in which
America's not going to last 400 years. Come on.
It may not last 2 more hours, but
yeah.
I'm just saying, like, for me, and again, I'm speaking as one white straight woman. I don't think it's appropriate for white children to dress as the characters from Black Panther yet.
I received that, and I think you make valid points. And honestly, I think you might have swayed my opinion on this matters.
And that's, I don't know, that's just where I'm at. I'm not judging white parents in conversation with Black communities that kind of have gotten, I guess, that okay. You know, I don't know, like, if Qadry gifts my 6-year-old white kid a Black Panther costume, like, that is permissive in certain contexts. I don't know that I would let my kid wear it out into the world, right? It's the do no harm thing. Like, I haven't checked with the entirety of the Black community to this.
Sure.
And Qadry apparently does not speak for them.
I don't. I definitely
yeah.
do not.
But
I do not.
Qadry as an uncle to my children and somebody in beloved community, I would, I would go off of, these are conversations that need to be had within community specific. Appropriation is never okay. Appreciation can have different levels, I think, within certain communal contexts.
When I was in middle school, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, at in the county, which is predominantly white, and there was a desegregation movement. We had students from the city bust in who were predominantly Black. And I remember the scandal the white kids interpreted when FUBU became a thing in like 1995, for us, by us, because there was something that these suburban white kids weren't privy to, were not party to, were not able to take over. I just brought that up. I do apologize because I need to ask us to move to the last question, if that's all right. I have another call that I would rather stay here and talk Black Panther all day, but I can't. So the question is, Qadry, in the witness of Scripture, and there's plenty of Scripture, of course, where who lines up best to T'Challa? Who lines up best to the Black Panther? Are they the same person, same character, same concept, or are they different?
This is complicated. All right, so in one respect, I would say the Black Panther, as far as the mantle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly in a New Testament context, the Black Panther mantle reminds me of Christ, right? It's this legendary, mythical figure that is the epitome of the union and connection between God and humanity, right? Which is, he's human, but he's different from every other human. Like, there's something about him that sets him apart, right? He's anointed in a special way. Like, he doesn't say things that we can't because he's it, right? He's the one. And I think particularly why it's Christ-like is when the Black Panther dies, the mantle gets passed on, right? And I'm looking at that as Christ being lynched and the resurrected Christ passing the Spirit on to the apostles, and the apostles passing it on to everyone at Pentecost, and the church was still here, right? So I look at the Black Panther mantle as a Christ-like figure. I think it's easy to say T'Challa is the Christ figure. T'Challa is like Jesus as well, particularly the resurrection theme is real obvious. That's too easy for me. I'm going to say T'Challa reminds me of second Isaiah.
Ah, nice.
And second Isaiah is technically not a character, right? Again, I'm not a
no, I think that's brilliant. Like, say more, please.
Yeah, I would need my my Hebrew Bible scholars for real jump on me if I'm wrong, because it's not my area's expertise. But I'm gonna say T'Challa is more second Isaiah because there's the lineage thing, right? Where I think in more Orthodox Christian traditions we talk about Isaiah as being a singular figure, a singular person, a singular prophet. My influence from liberal theology informs me that Isaiah was probably, how they say, a school of prophets, writing back and forth about each other, to each other, with regard to the contemporary political and social issues that Israel was facing at the time, and how that mantle got passed on to the second and third generations. So T'Challa would fit in probably in the second generation. Why I say that is because I think his character development represents preserving the best parts of the tradition while still being progressive enough to realize that the ancestors aren't always correct. What I say with Second Isaiah, right, is that looking back to the first Exodus from Egypt, but having the courage and the foresight to start theologically reflecting on the second Exodus and how the exiled people are going to come back into Jerusalem, and how there needs to be a renewal. There needs to be a different approach to the way things have been being done for so long. The message of last generation ain't exactly lining up with this one. We need a new prophetic message in order to deal with our contemporary issues. So yeah, second is who comes to mind.
You want to go, or I've got mine?
I do want to go because
Okay,
I'm so excited because mine was
this one I knew. I was like, it came to me like as I have it like written down here. So
mine was the author of the Gospel of Matthew for the same reasons of Second Isaiah, because Matthew, Jesus is reinterpreting the law over and over again and saying, "You have heard it was said, but I say unto you." And the whole, he's supposed to parallel Moses and he's supposed to invoke Elijah, but it's not. It's the next. Yeah. Like, all right, I'm thrilled because I think you're brilliant, Qadry, and I feel brilliant. And I'll say in Hebrew Bible one, I'm going to go for Hagar only because she's in my brain right now, of a parallel tradition that still it's not separate, but it's just out of frame.
Yeah,
and that's how it is in that world. And Will Gaffney's Womanist Midrash. I'm
reading it right now. Oh my God,
amazing!
Fire!
It's so good. And here's a shout out to all of you who have not gotten it, get it. But also, she's doing a Womanist lectionary too, which I just cannot wait for. Like pre-order.
Yeah, pre-order. So that's it. And Spiff.
So I have written down that I think T'Challa is Peter, because he on this rock I will build my new church. I mean, like then he is the new church. He is the rock that is the new church.
Hey, I like it.
Something new. And so like that for me, like I was just like the minute that second plane with the ancestors, I was sitting there and I was like, "Ooh, this has some Peter vibes to it."
Like his vision in Acts 10.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, this is where, and so for me, like, we're in Acts, we're in Pentecost, and I was just like, we've got church happening, and I was like, and that is, I mean, I think part of me, I totally understand the understanding of like, you're meant to, I think, see T'Challa and Black Panther in a Christ-like way, right? And like the Jesus in Christ and things like that.
It was too easy.
But that's okay. But I think, so I had a question here with like, who or what is God, as our kind of Western Christian Judeo God for Wakandans, which is not a direct parallel. That was just like me thinking this out, because I saw this really clear vision for me of T'Challa and Peter. Okoye is Miriam and all her women. I was like, that's my girl. But that flower deity, the flower that can be used and is at work and within all of us, was really the Holy Spirit for me. And this kind of the anointing of the Holy Spirit is when you ingest it, but it's like technically available to everyone.
Yeah.
And it's incarnational and second coming of Christ too. We eat Christ's body, we are Christ's body.
Yep.
So that's where my head was at, where these workings, and I love that all three of us like pull different parts of scripture, which just means that our God is still speaking and using us for the arts, for the good, and for the culture. I mean, I landed at the very end, the very last scripture that came to me at the tail credits of watching T'Challa and Shuri in Oakland, right? Like, shout out, I'm an East Bay girl. And this is like watching that was Revelation 7:9, which has a real strong desire to recognize and protect like cultural distinctions. It is not about all of us being one, but it is all about us, about being one in Christ, but maintaining the things that make
Yep.
and good.
Uniformity.
And yeah, hegemony is sin in lots of different ways. But when we try and assimilate and make, when we have a vision that whiteness is the way of liberation for all people, we have failed. We have sided with those that are evil. And that's part of what Qadry has called us to do earlier, is to get uncomfortable. We're going to have to lose some things. And that vision of whiteness is what we need to lose. That vision of white being the epitome of what it looks like to live faithfully, or to live, those images of white Christ need to come out of our churches. And because it is idolatry and it is sin and it is not faithful to who or what God is and is doing within all of us. And so Revelation 7:9 is where I ended, of really utilizing the cultures that we are born into and of and live within, and holding them sacred and using the best of them to lift up the best of others, and to live faithfully in the kingdom, recognizing and valuing the diversity, the divinity of diversity, as Pastor Alvin Jackson used and coined for the bar. So.
Qadry, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
No, this was fire, man. I was glad to be here. This was dope, man. I'm loving it.
It is a gift and a grace, and thank you. Next week, Spiff and I will be with Shauna Stites, the pastor of.
Who, if you're not following, Shanna's the senior minister of Community Christian Church, in Kansas City. She's doing some real work, y'all. She prayed yesterday and the day before. So they sit right on the square in Kansas City where the protests were happening, and people have tagged her building and have shattered glass, and she is praying with one of the tear gas canisters and holding space and, really faithfully talking about what it means to live as white Christians in this time. And we are talking U.S. women's soccer. And
it's Spiff's birthday.
It is also my birthday next Wednesday. And so,
Yes.
but if you have not read the statement by the U.S. women's national team, I will post it. They had a statement from their their black and brown players, that actually just their black players, that talked about what it's like in this time to play and represent the U.S. as professional sports team in the world. It's really incredible. So we will be here next week with that conversation as I turn 37. So
nice. Qadry, thank you again and again and again. Spiff, I will see you sooner than later, and be well, y'all. I'm going to stop the recording.